Part two of Dostoevsky and Notes from the Underground. I wanted to give you some background about Dostoevsky that will connect the dots a little bit about him, his life, his work, his literature, how he's regarded, make some brief points. So Dostoevsky was born in 1821, and in 1949, I believe, when he was 28, due to his activities, I think he was part of a literary club or a journal that the Tsar didn't like. He was imprisoned and then sentenced to death. And what happened was that the deaths, he was put before a firing squad with three other people. I think there were four of them, and blanks were fired, and as a lesson to give him a warning. So he basically thought at that age that he was dead. And subsequently, he was sent to a labor camp for 4 years and spent another few years in prison. So a lot of suffering and trouble and imprisonment and persecution in Dostoevsky's life. This will explain a lot about him. I read some commentary and someone said this is the gloomiest book ever written. And I don't know if that's the case, maybe for its time, but it's definitely a gloomy book. But I think that's besides the point. Dostoevsky suffered a great deal during his life, and actually when he came back from prison, he really took his literary aspirations and work to another level. He worked frantically and furiously kind of to make up for lost time, and Notes from the Underground was his first serious work coming back from that time. And after that, he wrote Crime and Punishment, then The Idiot, and his Demons, and his last novel was The Brothers Karamazov, I think in the last 2 years of his life. But why this is regarded as a groundbreaking book is it's really the first existential novel and shows us as an art form, wrote about the birth of self-conscious man. Descartesian, the philosopher Descartes, who famously said, Je pense donc je suis, I think, therefore I am. And Hegel, who celebrated rational man. Both of them were really the celebrations of rational man, enlightened man through only his mind, his thinking. And Dostoevsky, this philosophy embittered Dostoevsky to no end because he thought it was a European philosophy imposing itself on Russians and ruining the spiritual nature of the Russian people because, I don't know if you know, but Russia has always been a deeply Orthodox and Christian country, and he thought this was really interfering with man's spiritual nature. And Notes from the Underground, the main character, the narrator in it, was a symbol of man, as I said in the first part, trapped in his own mind, cut off from nature and cut off from his spiritual self. And all he had left was first, self-consciousness, the birth of hyper-self-consciousness man, hyper-conscious human being, which played out in the cities in Russia. And this was reflected in Dostoevsky's thoughts about urbanism, the city reflecting man's lost nature to nature and inflicting that wound back on him. When all he sees is himself and disregards nature, nature will penalize him. It was the harbinger of modern literature. And I think that's what's the importance is in how deeply he was willing to go into man's fallen state when he is separated from that nature. The thinking man who only thinks, and that had brought us a long way, but who only thinks will be penalized. And so is born the underground man who can only wish for more suffering and his own annihilation.